And now finally we have a technology that is also accessible. Because just think, in the 90s, a virtual reality headset costed around $90,000. $90,000. At the moment, in our products, in our solutions, we are using a headset that costs $200.
Well, hello, it's DeAndre, and this is the Pioneers Show, the show where we talk with innovators, makers, entrepreneurs, basically people who are creating their own trails and creating their own lives, so that we all can learn how to work on our own lives. This is episode 8, and I'm your host, André Albuquerque. You can find me at It's DeAndre on Twitter and on Instagram, as well as the show at Pioneers Show on Instagram. Before I go on and explain who today's guest is, I would really like to thank Marcin for the introduction. With us today, we have Valentino Megale. Valentino is the founder of Softcare Studios, a company that launched Tommy Game, a VR game that is disrupting healthcare. I'll repeat it, VR that is disrupting healthcare. We go all over the place from the aspects of VR and AR in today's society, all the way to the impact of VR and the porn industry. I must say that this was one of my favorite episodes so far. I don't want to take up more of your time, so let's jump into the show with my man, Valentino. Welcome, Valentino. How are you?
Good. Thank you, Andre. And how are you?
All good. Thank you very much. Welcome to the Pioneers Show. It's a great pleasure having you here. Once again, thank you for Marcin for the introduction. So, Valentino, for people who don't know who you are, who are you?
I'm Valentino Megale. I am a PhD in neuropharmacology, and at the moment, I'm the CEO of a digital health company that is called Softcare Studios, where we are working using virtual reality and artificial intelligence in order to improve the patient's experience during therapy and during hospitalization. So we are using these new innovative technologies, supporting each other to change and improve the approach that we have to patients during therapy. An approach that takes into account not only the clinical data, not only the clinical idea of their well-being, but also their psycho-emotional needs, their social needs. So patients experience during therapy extreme conditions. And obviously, they definitely need a holistic support. And today we have the technology, the digital technology, that is able to treat and support them in these details, in these parts of the therapy.
And what's that technology right now? What are you building specifically?
I just want to make an example.
Okay.
Patients during therapy and during hospitalization are treated with painkillers, for example, for pain management. They are treated with sedatives, so with anxiolytics and with other kind of drugs that are used to reduce their stress and make them more collaborative with doctors. So today we can do that without using drugs, or maybe reducing the utilization of drugs using digital technologies, such as, for example, virtual reality. So virtual reality is definitely not only an entertainment technology. It's not just a device that you put to see 360 degrees videos on YouTube, on see virtual reality games. It's something more. There is more science behind of that. Mm-hmm. And first of all, a cognitive tool. So it's able to have a very important impact on the psycho-emotional balance of the person. So it can be used to entertain, but it can be used to relax people, to reduce the stress, to distract them. But distraction is very superficial element of all the story. It can be used to reduce the stress, the anxiety, and the pain perception of people during therapy without using drugs. And this is not something new. This is something that is studied in the last 40, 50 years of academic research. Now it's going on the market.
Wait, you said 40 or 50? 50?
50, exactly. Because the first headset has been studied and developed in the early 50s by the US Army. And since then, the academic researchers in the universities studied how virtual reality impacts on human cognitive dynamics, how it impacts on how we think, how we perceive the world, and how we experience the world. So there is a huge amount of research, of academic research, showing the effects of this technology.
Mm-hmm.
And now, finally, we have a technology that is also accessible. Because just think, in the 90s,
Mm-hmm.
a virtual reality headset costed around $90,000. $90,000. At the moment, in our projects, in our solutions, we are using a headset that costs $200, which is standalone, which is not wired to computers, which do not requires a smartphone, for example. It's a standalone. It's a device.
Standalone VR headset for that little?
$200. I don't know if I can say the name of the company, but definitely yes. We are using the new. So this is the year of the standalone companies, of the standalone VR headsets, and every company will deliver his own solution, and that's great because just a few years ago, I was saying people, in future, I believe that we will bring with ourselves infinite digital worlds in our hands, just traveling, just like we do using notebooks or smartphones. And the time has come. Now we have standalone smart headsets that we can bring wherever, and we can show digital worlds to everybody. And this is amazing. This opens great opportunities because now it's time to use all the knowledge matured in academia to provide not only entertainment, to provide value to people, for example, in digital health.
Well, you got into some interesting ideas that I would like to talk with you. First of all, so you said that this is at least this year and probably the next, this is the era, let's call it probably era of the standalone VR headsets, right?
Yeah.
So the main, I would like to get in closer into that information. So you're telling me that in theory, but in action, in practice, companies are now have the exact technology to eventually go on and build their own VR headsets without any kind of smartphone and use of any other underlying technology. Is that it?
What I'm saying is that this year, starting this year, we will have the good hardware platform, the good VR headsets that are applicable and that are scalable to very different fields because they are very affordable with respect to the past. So we have very different companies, Oculus, HTC Vive, Sony, and others. And basically, the next challenge is not only the hardware. Obviously, the hardware will be improved. It's always improvable. It will become thinner, even cheaper. The performance will improve. But the next challenge, the very challenge, is the content, is the software. The VR companies of the future will focus on the software because there is a lot of research and a lot of knowledge behind, and we now have the opportunity to deliver contents that are impactful on society, on education, on training, on digital health, on manufacturing.
Yeah. That I think it's a great. How do you say it? I think it's a great upgrade on current situation.
Absolutely. Just think that this wave of revolution, of VR revolution, started in 2012 when the first Oculus Rift was delivered on the market, thanks to Kickstarter and thanks to the guys like Palmer Luckey. And in that period, the headset was heavy, expensive, was linked to a more expensive computer. So it was a very tricky situation. Now we have the standalone one, and it's amazing.
You know, I think right now until today, I've only used VR like 4 or 5 times, and was always in trade shows. And I mean, at least for me, I've never felt like I was fully immersed in the situation. You know?
Okay, sure.
It was always a very either amateur or poor quality imagery, even though the images were incredible. Or I don't know. So is the technology up to speed right now? Can you stream VR in 4K or something like that, where you can actually trick the brain that's seeing something real?
So let me make a little description about the technology. So what we call immersion is basically how we deliver the virtual reality content through technology. Depends from very different factors. It depends from the quality of the headset, from the quality of graphics, from the resolution, definitely. So the resolution is going to be better from 4K to 8K, etc., etc.
Okay.
It's dependent from the audio, from 3D audio. But the most important thing is that all the stimuli has to be delivered in a coherent way. That's to say, the timing of the visual stimuli, the timing of the sound stimuli, they need to be precisely delivered in a coherent way to the user. They have to resemble the realistic environment. And when you experience a content that is poor designed or even very well designed, but the stimuli are not provided very well, the immersion just fell because you understand that it's something not real. You understand that it's something not completely realistic. But just one thing. When we need to understand how our brain works. When you perceive the world on a two level.
Okay.
On a first level, you perceive the world because you know that you are perceiving the world. Is the conscious part of our perception. And obviously, when you try virtual reality, you can even understand that it's not real. Obviously, you are sitting on your chair and you are experiencing the roller coaster. You know that it's not real. Okay. And you can even hear other people talking to you from the external world. So obviously, you know it's not real. But there is another layer of the perception. So there is a whole amount of stimuli that are perceived and processed by your body, by your brain, even if you do not know that it is occurring. So you are processing a lot of data without your consciousness. It's an unconscious, involuntary perception part of the whole story. And what is important is in this part is that the stimuli are processed without your knowledge, and they have an effect on your body. They have a psychophysiological effect on your body. So, for example, if you are experiencing a roller coaster in VR, you know it's not real, but your body perceives it as real. Your heartbeat increases, your respiratory rate increases, and you have even experienced the so-called motion sickness. That is not exactly a natural and a good thing in virtual reality because it's coming from a bad design of the experience. It's not linked to virtual reality, but a bad design of the environment. But what I want to say you is that your body reacts independently from your consciousness, and this stimuli can guide your body and your brain into states of sickness or well-being. This is the part thing.
So you can experience so basically you're saying that you can experience motion sickness even if you're sitting down.
Yes, even if you're sitting down. The only situation when I tested you are not going to experience motion sickness is when you are lying on the bed. And this is something that depends on how our brain is wired and how it works. But if you are sitting, you will still experience motion sickness. Definitely, yes. You are not going to fall, but you are experiencing motion sickness. So what I want to say is that it's not important that you believe or not it's real. It's important how much real it seems to your brain, because your brain is able to determine states of sickness and well-being in your body without your knowledge and without your control. So virtual reality is first of all dedicated to this part of the brain. Obviously.
Sorry to interrupt you by this, but one of the things that you were just saying, so basically you can trick your brain into feeling this. And this is actually something that on an intellectual level, I'm very interested. So when you talk about tricking the brain that something is happening, how bad can you trick the brain to figuring out that, or to, how do you say it? So imagine this. How long until we as humans can get tricked by VR or AR and people start thinking that we're in a matrix?
Okay. So It's a very interesting question, obviously, because Matrix is definitely linked with all this world of virtual reality. Science fiction analyzed and processed a lot of virtual reality. So let me tell you one thing, that our brain is wired on the basis of how real reality works.
Mm-hmm.
And it's wired on the basis of how our senses work.
Okay.
So just like for our muscles, the stimuli that triggers our muscles to work, to grow, to develop is mechanical stimuli. For our brain, the same stimuli that helps brain work, develop, improve in time is basically the experience. And every experience is a multimodal element. Okay, it's a multimodal kind of information. Let's just say is based on external stimuli, is based on internal stimuli, and is based also on a third element, which is basically memory. So all the experiences that we made before, and thanks to that, we learned how to understand, predict, and approach to reality. So external, internal, and memory. So basically, if we want to trick the brain, we need to address to all these kinds of channels that communicate with the brain. At the moment, in virtual reality, we use two main channels that are visual stimuli and obviously the audio stimuli. We still lack a very important stimuli, which is haptics. It's not so easy to develop haptics able to resemble to real haptics. Okay, obviously we have not also the taste, we have not also the opportunity to get flavors, etc. It's something more complex, but I think that with virtual reality would be very difficult to achieve these goals. And there are other technologies that are developed that have the goal to reach a deeper level of immersion, a deeper level of presence. Because I want just to say two elements. Immersion is achieved with technology. The presence, the sense of virtual reality as a real environment is the perceptual consequence of immersion. Okay, so this is the immersion is on the side of technology, the presence is on our side. And these technologies that I'm saying is basically the BCI, so the brain-computer interfaces. I don't know if you heard about Neuralink.
Yes, the Elon Musk thing. That
Exactly. So I believe personally that could be the next steps beyond virtual reality, because virtual reality is something non-invasive. This is very important to say. It's non-invasive. It's providing us the stimuli, and our brain is just percepting the stimuli as realistic. And obviously all our experience is made by the brain. But Neuralink is going deeper, is going to provide an invasive interface, which is linked to our brain, providing all kind of stimuli. And in that case, I believe, I don't know when, how, etc. It's very complex to understand, but I believe that that kind of interface would be able to provide haptics and any kind of other stimuli, because it's acting directly to the brain. It's not mediated. Virtual reality is still mediated. It's very, is more complex than any other media, but it's still mediated.
Yeah, the main thing when we talk about that, I actually didn't think of Neuralink. If we assume that we can get like a Neuralink kind of sensation, like several movies or games that have already been told about, where someone gets, let's say, in touch with VR and you can basically control a full person. My main fear of VR and AR is, once again, on an intellectual level, is that someone can, let's say,
control.
I won't say control, but actually lose control. So is there a possibility? Obviously, the studies haven't been made because there's still no such technology on that deep level. But can someone, you get not have the drugs, when you get too many drugs, you get on a overdose. Can you
overdose? Yeah.
So can you overdose on VR and AR? So can you overstimulate the brain into shutting it down, and eventually, when you get out of VR or AR, can you some way or another, I don't know, I don't have any data on this, of course, but can you, okay, let's take a step back. Let's assume AR.
Mhm.
We,
So, yeah,
AR and VR, but let's take on the AR first, and then we can go into the VR.
Mhm.
Let's think Pokemon Go, you were basically walking around and you could see things jumping around. If you have someone with some kind of glasses or visors or something where you can see AR, if you eventually overdose people with that much information, can someone create or develop some kind of schizophrenia or something like that because of the overdose of stimuli?
I think that so. First of all, let's start with science.
Mm-hmm.
And at the moment, we have not similar objective studies that can make us to say yes or not.
Okay.
First of all, no, because similar studies needs time, needs a huge amount of people tested specifically for that. So we have not this data, but AR is a technology that is non-invasive, that is definitely less immersive than virtual reality, definitely less immersive, because you still see the real world around you, and eventually you can see some digital elements inside. Okay, and it's more than AR. It's mixed reality in that case. I think that the possibilities of schizophrenia, etc., is not that the people are going to develop schizophrenia because of that.
It's
but
it's
because
an underlying already
exactly,
pre-existent.
exactly. If they have pre-existing tendencies, genetic issues, obviously, that
Okay, yeah, that
that
makes sense.
makes developing schizophrenia very easier than other people, that could be an issue. For example, it has not been studied. Based on my experience, but it can be an issue, obviously. But just like for everything, even for I don't know, for smartphone use or computer use, people with some pre-existing problems can develop specific
Like
dependencies.
epilepsy and those other mental issues. Yeah, I know. Yeah, that makes sense.
Mhm. Regarding virtual reality, the problem could be greater, obviously, because it's more immersive and there are more stimuli delivered directly to the brain. But even in this case, it's more based on pre-existing situations. It's not a triggering cause, but it can trigger pre-existing situations.
Oh, yeah, that was one of my fears. Yeah, I think that's one of the main things that whenever I think about either AR or VR, I think that once again, full lack of knowledge here, but I always assume that there might be an issue here that
Obviously,
people are not counting on because it's just such an interesting technology, which I completely agree. Another
but
question. Yeah, sorry.
I want just want to add one element. Every technology can be used in a good way or bad way, obviously.
Of course, but
Any technology can have issues and consequences. Just even the normal Facebook, no, the social addictions, the social network addiction sometimes, or the smartphone addiction. So it's all depending on how we use technology and why we use technology. Because if people are going to use social networks because of some personal problems in daily life, they can develop addiction. And it's not dependent from social network. Social network are just one of the main medium that they can use to express their addiction to something else. So it can be with virtual reality in future, with augmented reality, and so on.
Wait, this is actually something that I don't hear a lot. So you're saying that social media as a addiction might not be an addiction itself, just to figure out if I'm hearing correctly. It's more of presents an already underlying problem that it just got something to addict us on. Is that it?
I think that we can divide and break down the addiction in different levels.
Okay.
So maybe people can have very soft addictions to social networks because they are addicted to their routine. Okay, because we are addicted to routine. So if social network becomes the first element that we see at the morning, the last thing that we see at the evening, it is an addiction, no? But maybe it is balanced by our life, but our healthy life. But if someone has personal problems, I think, And if someone has work issues, etc., I think social network can be the very easiest way to cope with that problem, no? Because it can be a way to express all his problems in a digital community where there are no critics, no problems, etc., etc., etc. So there are different levels of the problem.
But at the same time, I think that, at least scientifically speaking, from what I've been reading, the problem with the social media kind of addiction is more on the dopamine level, right? So you get a like, you get a comment, it's a dopamine rush, and that then as an addictive hormone or chemical.
Sure.
People
the
crave it.
Definitely yes. That's to say, every feedback that we receive on the social networks is triggering the release of dopamine. But obviously, it's not a direct element that creates addiction. No.
Okay. Yeah.
Addiction is a huge word, and to be really addicted, it needs more important issues behind.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So going back to the VR thing, you said a few minutes ago that you're using on your product, and we can go further into that, of course, that you're using VR in terms of medical data, and that VR has been studied since the 1950s, right?
Yes. So basically, what we are doing with our technology is supporting patients in pain management. And in the reduction of clinical anxiety and the stress levels that they experience during therapy. And virtual reality from this point of view has been studied since the 80s, 90s, because in the 80s, the first studies have been made on the pain management by doctors like Hunter Hoffman in the US, where they developed the first game to help patients with burns to better cope with the extreme pain delivering from that situation. No?
But sorry to interrupt you, but the coping mechanism here is just that it distracts them, or it provides them with specific stimuli that then they forget about it? What's the underlying?
Sure. So in the most of cases, we need to say distraction because it's the easiest way to understand it. No, but it's basically there is more science behind of it. Okay. A lot of researches are still ongoing. And what can I say is that starting from that first game that is called Snowboard, they understood, also thanks to MRI data, that the pain centers, the centers in our brain that are interested in the pain perception, are literally switched off thanks to virtual reality.
Ooh,
and this is not just distraction. The senses of the patients are engaged. Their focus, their attention is focused out of the pain, but their pain perception centers are switched off. And that is amazing. That is something that cannot be achieved using, for example, a traditional video game, because you need the presence, you need the immersion for that. So, yeah.
That's fascinating.
Absolutely. It's something is scientific. So probably there are hormone pathways involved that are able to reduce pain, and not only during the virtual reality session. It was shown by researchers that the pain reduction thanks to virtual reality is long-lasting, even for 48 hours after 20 minutes of VR session. And that is amazing. That is amazing. So you can start to think, maybe we can reduce the opioid crisis in the world, especially in the US, using virtual reality instead of painkillers.
So basically, instead of giving them a high of opioids, we just give them like a VR headset and prescribe them for 20 minutes a day.
Exactly. Obviously, the final solution, the final formula of the prescription
treating the problem, right?
Yeah. And it's going to maybe not cancel the usage of opioids, but drastically reduce. And just remember, opioids means reduction of pain, but also a lot of adverse effects, such as addiction, such as longer hospitalizations, and reduced satisfaction by patients.
Okay, let's now turn on the skeptical human connection. if you take out the opioids, isn't there going to be a backlash from the pharmaceuticals?
Obviously, it's not positive for them, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And but on the other side, the use of virtual reality in the clinical pilot that have been performed in the US show that using virtual reality is not only reducing opioids, but it's also improving the revenue of the hospitals. So it will be a struggle, no? Because maybe the pharmaceutical companies are going to reduce the selling of the opioids. On the other side, hospitals could increase their revenue. But let me add another thing.
Of course.
We have been accelerated at the very beginning by companies like Merck, which is Germany, pharma company. We have been also awarded by another pharma company, Pfizer.
Really?
Just in Berlin, the last year. So just think, and this is very important reflection. Pharmaceutical companies have been described as drug manufacturers for more than a century. Now we have new tools to deliver therapy to patients, even digital tools, digital health. So all the pharmaceutical companies are not working only on classical drugs. They are starting to use digital health in their strategies. So just think that the future of pharmaceutical companies will not to continue to be drug deliverers, drug providers, but therapy providers. Therapy as a whole, therapy intended as a balance between drug, material, and digital support. So digital health is something very interesting for pharma companies. It's part of their strategy.
So at the same time, we can assume that in some period of time, they will no longer be pharma companies, but they will be health companies. They will change their focus from pharmaceuticals to health. Is that it?
It could be interesting, but it could be interesting. Pharma, but maybe it's not going to change the name, but we are going to change the idea of pharma. No, that pharma intended as something that is able to act on our body and provide an effect. And it can act in a biochemical way through drugs or through a more sensorial, experiential way, for example, with digital technologies.
This is fascinating. Okay. So another question that I have on VR. So everybody knows that most of the technologies in terms of media, at least, have been make or break decided by the porn industry, right?
Yeah, definitely yes. The porn is always the first coming with new technologies and uses them for their business, obviously.
And the main idea that I have is that, at least in terms of, let's say, great innovation, once again, in terms of technology on the media space, if it's make or break, are you assessing that probably you can be creating a shift that no longer you need the, let's call it, approval from the porn industry to make or break your own technology, the VR? Because I believe that in my own thought before this conversation, because I didn't know that there was so much good to be done in terms of the VR and the exchange of pharmaceuticals. But let's assume that VR porn never gets up to speed as people might want it to. Do you think that even still VR has the possibility to grow and let's call it, to grow and to win in this media space without, let's call it once again, the approval of the porn industry?
Yes, definitely yes. Even because VR is the next computational platform. So first we had the computers, next we had the smartphones that changed everything, and now we are going to have virtual reality. So virtual reality is something that is disrupting every kind of field, of economical field. Just think about education. There are a lot of people starting to use virtual reality to educate remotely students, because nothing is better than experiencing directly something. So you can look at videos, you can read books, but obviously when you can experience something, think about surgery procedures. When you can look and when you can do exactly the same thing in virtual reality, you can exactly understand how to make it. It's just like a workout for your brain. It can be used obviously for gaming industry. So there are a lot of fields that will determine the success of virtual reality behind the porn support, if you can say. Okay.
Yeah. I think it makes sense that the only question for me is that being that VR is a media outlet, it's at one point, even if you have health things, of course, I believe that a lot of people are assuming that VR will be more of a media outlet other than just health, right?
Sure. But it's just like with the smartphones.
Yeah.
It's the same. It's just a different way to experience media. Okay, in the smartphone, you can. So, what is the difference, for example, between a smartphone and a computer? You can experience contents remotely while moving everywhere without any specific performances required from your computer. This is something that makes your creativity mobile. Virtual reality makes your creativity immersive, so you can deliver entire experiences that has a completely different level of effects on people, and it helps us to reach new peaks of creativity, productivity, collaboration, social interaction, etc., etc.
Yeah. Totally agree. Man, this is something that I was not expecting. The health thing still, the pain management is still kind of kicking me.
Yeah, it's amazing. They are amazing, but it's just one of the pieces of the entire digital health application. Because just think about phobia. I want to make an example,
Okay.
if I can.
Sure, of course.
When I said before that we perceive the world with external, internal stimuli and the memory, our brain normally collects all this data, and inside of the brain, it realizes a sort of simulation of the world.
Okay.
So just think about it. You never perceive the world as it is. You only perceive the world as it is simulated into your brain. It's always mediated by your senses. So you are now perceiving a simulation, which is called a predictive model. You use the predictive model to understand if the world is positive or negative. You use the predictive model to catch opportunities on avoid dangers, obviously. But these predictive models, the way that you build these predictive models can lead to some issues. For example, phobias. So based on your previous experiences, you can, for example, be scared by spiders. No?
Of course.
And the spiders could be absolutely not dangerous, but you're scared by spiders. And this is dependent on your predictive model, because in your brain, in the simulation that you created about spiders, spiders are very dangerous. They're big and fast, and they are scary. So virtual reality has been used to treat phobias. How? Because if your predictive model comes from the experience, you can provide a digital experience that helps you better cope with that problem. For example, helps you get in touch with the digital spiders, be in a safe way. No, so it's not a real spider. You can touch a digital spider, you can approach a spider, and you can get used. You can recalibrate your predictive model. This is very important. Just like you can rewrite some words of your simulation. And in this way, when you come back to reality, you are not so afraid by spiders because your brain has been a little bit reprogrammed thanks to virtual reality. This is another application. There are a lot of applications.
So in the health industry, basically, you can help people like yourself, creating a game for pain management, but other coping mechanisms for people in the, let's assume, ER or in intensive care. But at the same time, you can use it for clinical studies in terms of psychology and, like you said, phobias.
Absolutely.
And many of the things that we probably aren't even thinking about it right now. Even training in surgeons, you can see when you are making the right cut. You can see where you're doing stuff like this, right?
Exactly. You can do that. And remember, you can do that remotely. You can do that immediately in real time from China to US remotely. and you can help people reduce drastically the cost of the education, because you can offer that experience not to one or to a limited group of students. You can do that to thousands or millions of students watching that content, for example, or experiencing that content. This is the revolution of education.
When do you think, honestly speaking, when do you think this might start becoming more mainstream? Do you think that now, with the companies being able to create their own unhelped, untooled headsets, do you think this will become more in the mainstream, or do you think we're still a lot of years out of the?
So when I said virtual reality started in the 50s, and its evolution in time was a continuously wave, not positive and bad moments. And the new revolution, the new wave, started in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2017, the last year, people started to be a little bit bored because of the huge headsets wired to expensive computers. No?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people started to say, maybe virtual reality is not going to be mainstream because of those headsets, wired, expensive, blah, blah, blah. But so the selling of the virtual reality a little bit decreased in time.
Mm-hmm.
And now, as I said, it's the real year of the development of virtual reality, because thanks to the headset, the virtual reality standalone headset, you can bring the headset everywhere. You are mobile. Okay, you are mobile. You can be nomad, etc., etc. So I think that now it depends from how technology will be improved in time, but maybe in 2-3 years, virtual reality as a standalone technology would become very mainstream in every field. 2-3 years, based on my experience.
Let's hope so. I mean, all the things that you just told me are very optimistic views of the applications of VR. So honestly, I think that's a great idea. One question. So from your accent, people probably might understand that you're from Italy.
Yes, exactly.
Where are you from?
I'm living now in Pescara.
Pescara,
which is close to Rome.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm Italian.
And what's your background?
I started my career as an academic researcher. I'm a biologist, and then I continued as a PhD in neuropharmacology. So I worked in France, in Austria, and in Italy too, synthesizing chemically the drugs used for therapies. So I started exactly from the pharma, not from the material and wet laboratory work. And since then, already during my studies, I started to be very passionate about digital technologies and how they can improve the therapy and the medical assistance. And I already worked in the past with my colleagues on other projects, for example, using even the 3D printing to realize biomedical projects. For example, prosthetics, for example, incubators, all 3D printed. And all this using remote collaboration and collaborative design through online platforms. So it was the first time we started to understand the potential of virtual collaboration and virtual reality too. We get in touch with a lot of virtual reality developers, and in that moment, we started to understand that virtual reality could be a huge tool to be used in the clinical settings.
Okay, and what made you be passionate about the digital health area? Because as a researcher, I mean, I think as a research environment, I think it's very fascinating. But what made you take the leap?
Sure. So I think that in the clinical settings, behind the hardcore clinical needs, there are a lot of clinical needs that are unmet. That's to say that the needs linked to psycho-emotional conditions of patients, their social relationships, the so-called patient's experience, and also the patient's adherence to therapy. So when we started to analyze the digital solutions, digital technologies, we understood that maybe digital health are not going to completely fight, for example, cancer. Okay, when we take into account, for example, artificial intelligence, yes, obviously, but a lot of digital health solutions are not going to fight a specific disease, but they definitely improve how the patients experience their therapy pathway. And that could be great because how patients experience therapy has an impact on their follow-up life. So, for example, children, they are stressed during therapy, and that stress will have a huge impact on their adult life. It will increase the possibility to mature specific diseases during their adult life, problems, psychological problems, sociological problems. So if we support patients during therapy, it's also a work of prevention, psycho-emotional prevention for patients. So where everything changed, we started our work on that, and in 2016 we joined a hackathon in Rome. The hackathon was the first hackathon in Italy organized by the German pharma company Merck.
Incredible.
From Darmstadt. That was great. And we were challenged to solve this clinical unmet needs. And we were challenged in a 24-hour hackathon. So we worked day and night without sleeping. And we were very tired. We designed a lot of solutions, but in the middle of the night, when we were very tired, very, very tired, we developed the final idea.
But because the idea that you developed, just to figure out, let's assume that there are people that are working on their own corporate job or anything.
Sure.
You developed, like, you literally coded the thing, or you just wrote something down on a paper? What did you do to present? So let's assume that we have someone out there that's listening to our interview right now, to our conversation, and wants to do something on something that fascinates them. Doesn't have to be necessarily health, but let's apply this to any other industry. What did you do in terms of the hackathon?
So the hackathon was 24-hour. So what we developed was a visual demo about what we are going to do. And obviously, the very challenge was not the product in itself, but the business model behind of it. So how you're going to propose that project to improve the healthcare.
Okay.
And in the middle of the night, we comes up with the name of the project and with the idea of the project. The project is Tommy. And we developed the idea of a virtual reality experience based on our experience in virtual reality and knowing how virtual reality can improve the psycho-emotional balance of the people, to be used and dedicated to pediatric patients, especially at the beginning to children with cancer in the hospital. So we thought about a virtual reality experience for children with cancer, designed in collaboration, obviously, with doctors and psychologists to reduce pain, reduce anxiety, or reduce the stress related to hospitalization, but at the same time, able to test the children, able to collect data from their psycho-emotional well-being state, and also about some key biometric parameters, data that can be used by doctors to improve therapy efficiency, to adapt therapy to their needs. And we started
sorry to interrupt you, just to figure out something. So basically, you're the game that you've the project itself that you've now been using with already some doctors and some patients. The data that you're collecting is psychomotor skills. So you can say that if a person starts to move slower, you can see if their neurological deficiencies are getting greater. Is that it, or what kind of data can you get of it?
Sure. You said game. I started saying virtual reality experience just because we decided to propose the virtual reality experience as a game because it is more motivating, it is more engaging in time for children, and first of all, it allows us to provide Tommy not seen as a medical device by children, because children are scared by medical tests.
Oh, that's a great I said game because I already knew that.
Yes. Absolutely. But this is a crucial point, no? Because you can provide virtual reality experience even not as a game for clinical purposes. But we worked also in the hospitals, in pediatric hospitals such as the Bambino Gesù in Rome. We discussed with doctors, with the psychologists, with the patients, with the parents, and we understood which parameters we need to collect. So first of all, what the medical staff needs. The medical staff needs data about the performances of children, the performances that are impacted by neurosurgery, for example, or by chemotherapy. So, for example, we analyze the motor coordination that can decrease because of chemotherapy. We analyze sensory skills, such as visual skills or hearing skills, that can be decreased and impacted by neurosurgery. And we analyze also memory, for example, so cognitive skills, all elements that are normally tested in the hospitals, but they are tested with medical tests, and they are tested every 6-8 weeks during hospitalization. So imagine to collect similar data constantly, almost every day during the hospitalization, not every 6 weeks, and gain an easier access to the data, so to the parameters of children, understanding if there is an increase or decrease of the performances of children. And if there is a decrease, you can act immediately to change something in the therapy, to improve therapy, for example, and adapt to the children. This is the first goal. And
so the first project that you have live right now, it's Tommy Game. And
Tommy,
it's a game applied for children. I assume it's a more of a children-esque narrative.
Exactly. It's more children with an age between 8 and 14 years old.
Okay, and is the idea that Softcare Studios eventually goes on and creates other kinds of?
Absolutely yes. We have been already asked to deliver, to realize projects about adult rehabilitation, even regarding specific diseases that need specific treatments. So we can deliver, even for adolescents or for adult patients, virtual reality experiences to help them cope with that specific treatments. So there are a lot of solutions that we are asked for here.
And that's unbelievable, man. So sorry, it's just that I think that you have there a great opportunity to change even the outcome and the big picture of health as we know it. I mean, it's not far to say that probably VR therapy, like we've just stated, can even change the idea of hypnosis, because it's even a state of hypnosis because you're getting someone who's fully concentrated on a world that does not exist or in a deep centered mind, and you can get real-time data on everything that they're doing.
Definitely, yes. We spoke with people working on that too, and it's a very interesting field, that one of the hypnosis. Obviously, it has to be used in specific fields, for example, pain management. That could be very useful in that case.
And phobia, like you said, right?
And phobia too, yeah, and phobia too. But in phobia, you use more the so-called exposure therapy. You expose the people to the dangerous stimuli.
Through VR.
Exactly.
You can also do it without VR, but let's assume that even if someone is resistant on doing it right away, because they do, let's say, for example, agoraphobia, the fear of open spaces.
Sure.
If you don't want to give them an idea of giving them an open space, you can give them a VR platform when they can be presented with a thing, but at the same time consciously being aware that they're not in an open space. They're in an office with a psychologist and a VR therapist right next to them.
Exactly. Even, for example, to help people train during speeches, public speeches, it's another solution. There are some people who are scared by public speeches, and they can train virtual reality, and helps, because the brain still perceives the virtual reality as realistic. So if there are a crowd listening to you, you're anxious, even in virtual reality.
Man, I'm not kidding. I have a little bit of goosebumps just thinking the weird applications that we can have on a near future. You can do business coaching, you can do speech therapy, you can have this in education, you can do this in sports, you can do this in everywhere.
Absolutely. You can do very, very lot of things. And what I want to add to my speech is that in our vision, virtual reality will be used in healthcare as a digital cognitive tool. What we want to achieve with our Softcare Studios company is providing a virtual reality as a sensor. So a virtual reality coupled with artificial intelligence, able to sense your conditions, your emotional state, and adapt to your condition. Because this is the very challenge. The challenge is to provide an experience that is not standardized for everyone, that is able to adapt to everyone. This is a potential that can be achieved.
Sorry, can you repeat that? Sorry.
Yep.
Can you repeat that part?
Since the beginning?
Yeah. Sorry. No, doesn't have to be because I listen. I just want to be sure that I listen to everything very carefully.
Okay. So our goal with Software Studios Company is to deliver a virtual reality as a sensor. So not a standardized content for everyone, but a content that is able to adapt to the conditions of every user. And this can be achieved using, for example, virtual reality coupled and supported with artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence able to collect data about users' psycho-emotional state, process this data, and trigger virtual reality to change and adapt.
Sorry, that this part is just, it's even more overwhelming. Can you explain that a little bit more in depth, please?
Sure. Just based on our case, we developed, and we are obviously continuously improving. We developed machine learning algorithms that are able to exploit the commercially available VR headset without any modification to collect and measure your heart rate. So when you are going to wear a VR headset, we are able to measure your heart rate and integrate these algorithms in the VR content. So the VR content can change on the basis of your heart rate. Just imagine this, not only in healthcare, but in marketing, in every kind of entertainment too, in every kind of field. That is huge.
Yeah, this information is just different, or once again, I was not expecting this. I'm learning a lot with this conversation. Thank you very much.
That's good.
What just to figure out, so is the idea of Software Studios on the future is for you to give this hardware and the possibility of the software, but is the idea to open like a platform? Are you like the WordPress for VR in terms of therapy, or what if you have to create like an analogy? Are you going to be creating every game, or are you going to be opening a platform for other developers and other storytellers to create their own games?
So we are not thinking about a platform at the moment. We are thinking to propose a model. A model, just like I say, the virtual reality is a sensor. No? So a core model where virtual reality is able to collect biometric data and adapt on the basis of them. Applied in the digital health sector.
That part I understood. That part I understood. Sorry.
Yeah, at the moment, we will develop specifically VR experiences for specific disease, target patients, etc. We are not thinking ourselves at the moment as a WordPress or for other developers. Not at the moment.
But let's assume that, for example, I'm the owner of a doctor and I'm listening to this owner of the doctor. Stupid. I'm the owner of a hospital, or I'm a clinical therapist, and I'm thinking, oh, this might be very interesting. I'm going to propose this for my hospital or my clinic. And then they say, yeah, but we don't deal with kids from that specific age group. We would like to have more people over 70.
Sure. So we just apply the same model to the target patients represented by the elders. It's just another target patients. How we work is basically we go in the settings, we realize a need assessments, and on the basis of the need assessments, we develop a specifically adapted VR experience for them. So there is a core, there is a surface. In Tommy, the core is Software Studios. The surface are pediatric patients. So we can change the surface using the same core.
Once again, and I think that when you develop the surface, you have to take a lot of things into consideration. It's not only data from the age group, from this, but the demographic, but you have to take into consideration even cultural appropriation, not appropriation. You can still have to take into consideration cultural information. An elderly person over 70 in Italy is going to have a much different experience from a 70-year-old person from Germany or from Portugal, from the US, right?
Absolutely yes, absolutely yes. This is a very intriguing point. It's not obviously easy to target
Hmm.
at the moment. You need to realize a compromise, no, an average experience for them.
Okay, like an
But
evergreen content.
yes, but obviously the cultural differences are very important. For example, in Tommy, we are not using a specific language, Italian or English. We are using an intuitive design of the game where any child can understand what's going on based on the interactions and animations. So
You can
we
take the Sims approach where no one speaks anything, blah 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 blah.
exactly.
Good. That's a good point. Yeah, if you don't have any language restrictions, once again, if we talk about even cultural differences, may make a difference. No.
Sure, sure. No, no, we definitely agree because when we worked in the hospital in Rome,
Mm-hmm.
there were a lot of children coming even from the refugees camps. Obviously, in Italy we have also this problem, and there are children from Middle East, from Africa, etc. So the language barrier was a very huge barrier, and we cannot develop a solution that takes into account only English speaking people, especially with children. So we definitely defined this condition, the intuitive design.
Okay, let's now take a step back onto on this conversation.
Sure.
So you did research, like you said, you were doing pharma research on neural. What was the word? Sorry,
Neuropharmacology.
neuropharmacology. Thank you.
So at the very beginning in my career, I studied how molecules act on our brain and developed molecules to act on our brain.
Well, okay, you're way smarter than me already. Where did you learn more about VR? Because this is a tech company, so I assumed you were
Sure.
not a programmer, you were not a developer, you were not a designer.
I'm not. So in our team, we have 9 people,
Mm-hmm.
and we cover pretty every field, every element, of the pipeline of the development. We have biomedical engineers working on the biomedical device section. We have game designers working on specifically the design of the game and the experience.
Mm-hmm.
We have software and virtual reality developers working on that even since the past. We have business advisors. We have specifically VR technicians.
But you also need, I assume, so sorry to interrupt you, you may also need some kind of anthropological and sociological advisors and some kind of consultants on that area, no?
Obviously, obviously, yes. We work in strict contact also with the psychologists, with doctors, and we are building also and expanding our board of advisors with people working in the VR since for the last 30 years. So we had the opportunity to speak with them to refine our project, to understand what are the pain and gains of our solutions. And we went through 3 accelerator programs that are specifically dedicated to healthcare. So the first, the Merck accelerator program in Darmstadt. Next, in the Texas Medical Center in Houston, in the US,
Mm-hmm.
which is the biggest medical center in the world. And the program was definitely dedicated only to digital health. And we are now in Accelerate in collaboration with Copenhagen. So we are continuously learning. We are going deeper in the potential of virtual reality. Obviously, what we are building is an interface now between the research, the biomedical device, and the how we can say the smart business application. Because what I want to say is that there is a huge amount of knowledge about virtual reality in academia. But in academia, also based on my experience, there are a lot of ideas, a lot of informations, but they are diluted. They are not user friendly, if we can say.
Mm-hmm.
The goal of a startup is to make all this knowledge very immediate in the experience, to realize a product that is user friendly, easy to use, easy to apply in the economics of the world. So the startups is definitely a bridge, a transfer of technology that is coming from the academia to the real world society. And it's something very needed.
And from people who are doing that transition or wondering if they have what it takes to do this transition, is there any book, any kind of main content what's the main thing that you read or learned while doing your own transition?
We read a lot of books. We definitely had a lot of references, but I would suggest, for example, to study a little bit the researchers by a psychologist, an Italian psychologist, which is one of the pioneers of virtual reality in healthcare, which is called Giuseppe Riva, R-I-V-E, which is definitely propose groundbreaking visions and researchers in virtual reality and digital health. This is a very good starting point because he's also specialized in very immediate communication of all this stuff.
And for people in other industries, let's assume that you went into startup world, startup land, which is not necessarily only VR and health companies. So I assume that you're probably using some kind of frameworks already used by other startups, right?
Sure. For example, one of the best books in the field is the Business Model Canvas. It's called Business Model Canvas.
It's the business model generation, the book, right?
Exactly. And it's very good book because it's business model canvas are a good framework to start and develop any ideas. It's not only startup. Even if you have a blog, you need to go through the business model canvas to understand who is your audience, how to reach them, etc., etc. So it's very good starting point in this world.
Okay.
And the best book are people. Talk with people, talk with the startuppers, with entrepreneurs, and learn from them.
I really loved, I'm not kidding, I just love that quote you just said. The best book are people.
Yeah, it definitely is.
Okay, another question. So what drives you? This is a very weird question, but what made you do the transition from the research environment to the applicable application, doing something? What drives you? What's been driving you? What's been driving you to do this? What's the main goal behind your?
Sure. So first of all, personal passion. First of all, obviously.
But sorry to interrupt you, but was there something in your family? And this is too personal. We can cut it out from the interview. But was there any kind of personal presence or something that made you become passionate about this thing? Was there something that you experienced when you were younger or when you were growing up?
No, it's more a very lifelong passion about these technologies. And first of all, I think that the innovation comes from contamination. Okay, so you innovate when you connect different fields. So I experienced the academic world. And I'm now experiencing the startup and the entrepreneurial world. They're pretty different worlds, and they have pain and gains. No, so it's very nice to connect them because sometimes when you build startups, you need more data and the more scientific approach that is available in the academic world. But as I said before, in the academic world, sometimes you miss the smart approach to problems, to develop solutions. So it's great to have a scientific approach like in academia, but develop it and apply it in a very smart way as it is in the startup. So I like to link. I'm passionate about technologies, and I'm now in this field to have an impact with our solutions.
Okay, makes sense. What's the most difficult thing that you've encountered? So like you just said, you've done the transition, you've been passionate about technology, you've been passionate about academia, and you're in the technology part. What's been the most difficult thing you've found or you've been finding about what you're doing right now?
The most difficult is to link exactly the innovation with the for example, not to link, but to fit the solution, which is good solutions for patients with the economical cycle sales of the hospital. This is a very challenge of every digital health startup because digital health deals with problems that until now they have been very foggy. Okay, for example, the patient's experience. Now you can measure the patient's experience, and now you can understand how the patient's experience is linked with the revenue of the hospital. So to develop a solution which is sustainable and useful for the hospital too, you have to develop innovative business models. You have to understand the sales cycles of the hospitals and fit your product in that. This is a very challenging point, I think, for every digital health startup.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that as a health or digital health startup, it is my belief right now that I'm thinking that you're always facing a Satan trifecta, because you have to translate always the medical English or the medical Italian, the tech, and the business part. So you're always continuously translating three parts.
Sure. And you have to simplify a lot.
So
you have to simplify huge problems.
You have to simplify huge problems on the business side, but you have to complicate once again for the tech part, but you have to even go even deeper on the medical part.
Exactly. Absolutely, yes.
Damn.
But it's going to become a routine in some years. Obviously, now it's the pioneering phase.
And that's why we're in the Pioneer Show, right?
Exactly.
Okay, let's now jump into the fire rounds. I think I've already told you this, but this is how it's going to go. So I'm going to ask you something, and you have 1 minute to answer them. You agree?
Good. Yep.
Okay, what's the book you've given out the most?
It's a business model generation. Let's go through this because it's a good starting point if we talk about startups.
Okay, perfect. What's the tool you wouldn't be able to live without right now? What's the app? What's the tool?
The app that I definitely need now is Trello. It is very useful to organize the work in the team, even if the team is remote. So it's very smart tool for startups.
You use any kind of framework for Trello? Any kind of thing that you use, or just like, this is what has to be done, let's tackle it?
We adapt a little bit the Trello to our needs. So we organize it in lists based on our work, but it's the basic Trello.
Okay. If you started today from scratch, you just finished university, the PhD, let's assume now, because you're a very studied person. If you started today from scratch, you had all your knowledge, you just finished university and you have like 500 years with you, where would you focus right away? You have all your knowledge, you have all your current knowledge, but none of the experience.
So I would definitely start to study coding, 3D design and game design. And I would definitely focus again on digital health and space industry, because I think they are correlated.
Space industry?
Yeah.
Why space industry, if I may ask?
Because just imagine the astronauts are going to experience very long travels. And I think that they cannot have always all the health support that they have on the Earth. Just imagine digital health is the future of health in space. And I'm very passionate about both of them.
Interesting. I don't know if you saw, but I heard a podcast the other day from the Joe Rogan Experience, and they were talking with an astrophysician that for recruitment purposes, everybody that goes through the recruitment process has to do a VR game in order to be admitted according to their own knowledge. They don't want just the theoretical knowledge, but they want some practical knowledge, assuming that was practical. But now with the VR game, they can be even practical in that area. Did you know about that?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, yes. We also spoke with some people from NASA also while staying at Houston. So definitely the VR is huge in the NASA now.
So Houston was not a problem.
Not a problem.
Tell me something you've changed your mind in the last 6 months.
In the last six months?
Yes.
My mind was changed by my staying and travel during the accelerator program in the US, because US was a very groundbreaking experience for me. It was the opportunity to stay where the innovation is built, exactly in the US, for example, in Houston, in the Texas Medical Center. And it was nice to see how everything is possible if you have a good plan for that. And it changed it a lot.
Good. Last question in terms of of these fire rounds. What's the best thing has anybody ever done for you?
It's a support, emotional support when I'm in what I'm doing, and definitely the network availability. People who are willing to speak with what we are doing. People willing to connect. So people willing to connect and supporting us, it's a great thing.
Very well. Now it's time for the plugs. Valentino, where can people find you?
So they can find me on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
Definitely add me on my profile, or they can visit our site, which is www.tommygame.com.
Tommy with two M's and I, so TOMMI game.com.
Exactly. And or they can visit our social network pages on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Always link it to Tommy Game.
Tommy Game with, once again, TOMMI game.
Exactly.
Well, Valentino, it was a great time having you here at the Pioneers Show. Thank you very much for the conversation. I must say that this might have been one of the most favorite conversations that I've had on and off podcast, because I think I almost have now a PhD myself in VR, which I really appreciate it. Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks a lot, Andre. Thanks for the audience. I hope to be very useful for all the listeners.
Let's hope so. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for plugging into this conversation. Was this episode great, or was it great? Were you as shocked as me about some of the things that Valentino said about the effects that VR has on our brain? Amazing. I hope I'm here to witness their business flourish, and I truly hope they keep working on what it is, for me, a very impressive idea. Any information that you might have missed will probably be linked up in the show notes. If you enjoyed this conversation, consider subscribing to make sure that this podcast grows and we can get more people and help everyone be the pioneers of their lives and careers. If you enjoyed this conversation, let me know. Please leave a rating and review on iTunes or on any other application that you might be listening to this podcast. Once again, it was really, really a great pleasure having you over there.